This man is a wealthy CEO, but tonight he secretly disguised himself as a regular employee to inspect his own restaurant after a wave of complaints and staff quitting. There he found a 65-year-old elderly woman trembling as she chopped vegetables in the kitchen at 10:47 p.m. As he grew irritated, wondering why she was working so late, a faint cough came from inside the walk-in cooler, stopping him in his tracks. The old woman panicked and tried to block him, and the moment he opened that door, the truth inside left him completely speechless. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The rain had finally stopped, but the streets of Atlanta were still slick with water when James Morrison pulled into the Riverside Kitchen parking lot. It was 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and the restaurant should have been closed for hours. Yet there was a single light burning in the back, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. James killed his engine and sat there for a moment staring at that light. He'd built this restaurant chain from nothing, 15 locations across 3 states each, one carrying his vision of Southern comfort food done right. Real recipes, real ingredients, real people making real food. That's what Riverside Kitchen was supposed to represent. But Riverside Kitchen Atlanta, one of his flagship locations, was slipping. Sales down 20% over the last quarter, customer complaints up. Online reviews mentioning slow service cold food staff that seemed exhausted or indifferent. Staff turnover was through the roof. They'd gone through 3 line cooks in the past 2 months alone. Something was fundamentally wrong, and James intended to find out what. He pulled the baseball cap lower over his face and adjusted the fake beard the production team had insisted he wear for these undercover visits. At 58, with his face plastered across trade magazines and the company website, he was too recognizable to walk into one of his own restaurants without a disguise. The beard itched like hell and made his face sweat, but it would have to do. James locked his car and walked toward the back entrance, his footsteps echoing in the quiet parking lot. The air smelled like rain and garbage from the dumpsters. He tried the door, unlocked. That was the first problem. Security protocols clearly weren't being followed. Anyone could walk in here. Inside the kitchen was mostly dark, except for that single overhead light in the prep area. The smell hit him immediately, garlic and herbs, the lingering scent of the evening service. But underneath that was something else, something that made him pause and listen carefully. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of a knife hitting a cutting board. Steady, rhythmic, purposeful. Someone was working. James moved quietly through the kitchen, past the cold line where salads were assembled, past the grill station with its industrial hood, past the dish station with its stack of clean plates waiting for tomorrow's shift. He followed the sound deeper into the kitchen, toward the prep area in the back. When he rounded the corner, he stopped. An elderly black woman stood at the cutting board, her back partially to him, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. She wore a faded white apron tied twice around her thin waist because the strings were too long, and her gray hair was pulled back under a slightly yellowed hairnet. Her movements were methodical but slow, like every motion required conscious effort, like her body was fighting her with every cut. James noticed other things too. The way her shoulders were hunched, not with bad posture, but with exhaustion. The way her hands trembled slightly between cuts. The worn-out orthopedic shoes on her feet, the kind people wore when they had serious joint problems. The way she kept shifting her weight from one foot to the other, never able to stand comfortably. "Hello," James called out softly, not wanting to startle her. The woman's shoulders tensed immediately, but she didn't stop chopping. Her knife continued its steady rhythm. "Kitchen's closed," she said without turning around. Her voice was rough, tired, with a slight rasp that suggested she'd been on her feet talking all day. "I can see that. I'm Mark, new hire. They said I should come by tonight to learn the layout before my first shift tomorrow." Now she did turn, and James got his first good look at her face. She was in her mid-60s, he guessed, with deep-set eyes that held decades of hard living. Her face was lined with exhaustion, with worry lines carved deep around her mouth and between her eyebrows. There were dark circles under her eyes, so pronounced they looked like bruises, and there was something in her expression that made James's chest tighten. Fear. She was afraid of him. "Nobody told me about no new hire," she said carefully, her eyes darting to the door behind him like she was calculating escape routes. "Last-minute thing. Manager said it was okay for me to come by." James kept his voice friendly, non-threatening. He'd learned over the years that appearing harmless was key to getting people to open up. "You work here." The woman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm Dorothy. Dorothy Williams. Been working here 3 years. Prep cook. 3 years. That's good, means you know the place inside out. James looked around the prep area. Long shift today. Started at 11 this morning. James glanced at the clock on the wall. Nearly 11 at night. 12 hours. That's a long day. They paying you overtime? Dorothy turned back to her cutting board a little too quickly. Work needs doing. I hear you, but 12 hours is a lot. You must be exhausted. She didn't respond to that, just kept chopping. Carrots now sliced into perfect quarter-inch rounds with the ease of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Mind if I watch? James asked, pulling up a metal stool. Learn the process and all that. She hesitated her knife, pausing mid-air for just a second. Then she shrugged her shoulders, barely moving. Free country. James sat watching her work. Her technique was flawless, every cut precise, uniform, consistent, the kind of knife work that came from years of professional experience. But there was something off about the way she moved. Her hands trembled when she reached for a new vegetable. She winced when she bent to grab something from a lower shelf. Her breathing was slightly labored, like standing was taking genuine effort. This wasn't just tired. This was someone working far beyond what their body could handle. So, Dorothy, James said conversationally, how do you like working here at Riverside Kitchen? It's a job. Her tone was flat, giving nothing away. Good management. Her knife paused again, just for a fraction of a second. They're all right. Pays good. Pays what it pays. James watched her more carefully. She was choosing every word like someone walking through a minefield, someone who knew that one wrong answer, one complaint could cost her everything. You been here since 11 this morning, he said gently. When do you usually get off? When the work's done. And when is the work done? When it's done. James recognized evasion when he heard it. Dorothy, I'm not trying to cause trouble, just trying to understand how things work around here. She set down her knife and looked at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were hard defensive, but underneath that, he saw exhaustion so profound it seemed to radiate from her. Look, I don't know who you are or what you want, but I got work to finish. If you're here to learn, learn. If you're here to cause trouble, I can't help you with that. No trouble, James said, quickly raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. Just trying to understand the routine. She studied him for a long moment like she was trying to figure out if he was trustworthy. Then she went back to chopping. Things work like they always work in kitchens. You show up, you do your job, you go home. That's it. But it wasn't it. James had been in the restaurant business for 42 years. He'd started as a dishwasher at 16, worked his way up through every position, opened his first restaurant at 28. He knew restaurants, he knew kitchens, he knew the rhythms, the routines, the unspoken rules. And he knew when someone was working normal hours and when someone was being exploited. He knew the difference between dedication and desperation. Dorothy was desperate. You got family? He asked, keeping his tone light and conversational. Her knife slipped, just a little, just enough that the carrot round came out uneven. She caught it before it could do any damage, but James saw her hand shake as she corrected the mistake. Why you asking? Just making conversation. New guy trying to get to know people. Then make different conversation. Fair enough. James stood and moved closer to the prep station, close enough to see the details. Her cutting board was worn smooth in the center from years of use. Her knife was old but well-maintained, the kind of knife you kept sharp because you couldn't afford to replace it. There was a small photo tucked into the corner of her station, a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, grinning at the camera. Can I help? James asked. I should probably learn how to do this anyway if I'm working here. Dorothy looked at him like he'd grown a second head. You ever chopped vegetables before? Sure. How hard can it be? Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the tension, a small smile flickered across her face. It was gone in an instant, but James saw it. Harder than you think, baby. Harder than you think. She handed him a spare knife from a drawer and a cutting board. Onions. 1/4-inch dice, and watch your fingers. I ain't got time to take you to the hospital. For the next 10 minutes, they worked side by side in silence. James deliberately chopped slowly, messily playing the role of an incompetent trainee. His cuts were uneven, his technique awkward, but he was watching everything. The way Dorothy's hands trembled more as time went on. The way she kept glancing at the door like she was expecting someone to burst in. The way she winced every time she had to reach or bend. The way her breathing got more labored the longer she stood, and most importantly, the way she kept glancing at that photo of the little boy. "You doing okay?" James asked quietly after she had to stop and brace herself against the counter. "Fine." The word came out through gritted teeth. "You don't look fine. You look like you're in pain." Dorothy straightened up, her face hardening. "I'm 65 years old, and I've been on my feet for 12 hours. How you think I look? I think you look like someone who needs to sit down." "Can't sit. Work ain't done." "What work? It's almost midnight. Who's this prep for tomorrow's lunch service and the next day's? I'm behind." "Behind on what?" She didn't answer. Just went back to chopping, her movements getting slower, more careful. James watched her struggle and felt anger starting to build in his chest. Not at her, but at whatever system had created this situation. Before he could ask another question, a sound came from somewhere else in the kitchen. A cough. Small, muffled, but definitely there. Dorothy's whole body went rigid. The knife stopped mid-cut. Her eyes went wide with panic. "What was that?" James asked. "Nothing. Just the cooler making noise. Does that sometimes." Her voice was shaking now, all pretense of calm gone. Sounded like a person. "It wasn't." Her hands were trembling so badly she had to set the knife down. "Just the equipment. Old building makes all kinds of sounds." The sound came again. Definitely a cough this time, followed by a small voice that made James's blood run cold. "Grandma, I'm cold." Dorothy's face crumpled completely. All the defensive hardness melted into pure terror. She grabbed James's arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail-looking. "Please," she whispered desperately, "please don't say nothing. Please, I'm begging you. I'll lose everything. Please." James looked at her, then toward the walk-in cooler where the sound had come from. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly, like watching a car accident happen in slow motion. "You've got someone in there." Dorothy didn't answer. Tears were streaming down her face now. "Please, please don't tell nobody. I'll do anything. I'll work extra hours. I'll clean the bathrooms. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't tell Trevor. Please don't get me fired." The desperation in her voice, the absolute terror, it hit James like a physical blow. "Dorothy, I'm not going to tell anyone. I just want to understand what's going on." But she wasn't listening. She was spiraling into panic. "You don't understand. If Trevor finds out, he'll fire me. He's been looking for a reason. He told me last week I was on thin ice. He said old people like me are a liability. He said I should just retire and stop taking up space. But I can't retire. I got bills. Dorothy." James put his hands on her shoulders gently. "Breathe. I'm not going to tell anyone. But I need to know who's in that cooler." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "My grandson, Elijah. He's 8. He's got asthma. Bad asthma. I couldn't leave him home alone." James felt his stomach drop. "How long has he been in there?" "Couple hours, maybe 3. I put blankets down, gave him my jacket, but it's so cold in there, and I know it's wrong. I know it's dangerous, but I didn't have no choice." "Show me." Dorothy led him to the walk-in cooler with shaking steps. When she pulled open the door, cold air rushed out, carrying the sharp smell of refrigerated food. And there, sitting on an upturned milk crate in the corner, wrapped in a thin denim jacket and what looked like an old tablecloth, was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. His dark skin had an ashy, grayish quality from the cold, and his lips looked almost blue. He was shivering violently, his small body shaking uncontrollably. The boy from the photo, Dorothy's grandson. "Grandma." Elijah's voice was small and scared, and so cold that the word came out shaky. "Can I come out now? I'm really cold." "Yes, baby, yes, come here." Dorothy rushed into the cooler and pulled the boy into her arms. She immediately started rubbing his arms, his back, trying to generate warmth. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." James watched this scene, an elderly grandmother holding a freezing child in a walk-in cooler at nearly midnight, and felt something break inside him. This was his restaurant, his company, his responsibility, and this was happening under his watch. "Let's get him out of there," James said, his voice rough with emotion he was trying to control. "Get him warmed up." Dorothy carried Elijah out of the cooler. The boy was still shivering hard, his teeth chattering so loud James could hear it from several feet away. His breathing had a wheeze to it that James recognized immediately. Asthma. Dorothy set Elijah down on the metal stool and immediately wrapped him in her apron, rubbing his arms vigorously. "It's okay, baby. Grandma's here. You're gonna be warm soon." But Elijah's breathing was getting worse. The wheeze was turning into a whistle. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his small body working too hard to get air. "His inhaler," James said urgently. "Where is it?" Dorothy's face went pale. She fumbled in her apron pocket and pulled out an inhaler. But when she shook it, James could hear it was nearly empty. "Maybe 1 or 2 doses left. That's all you have. It's all I could afford this month." Dorothy's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the inhaler steady. "I was going to get it refilled next week when I got paid." She held the inhaler to Elijah's mouth. "Breathe in, baby. Nice and slow. That's it." Elijah inhaled the medicine, held his breath, then exhaled slowly. Did it again. Gradually, his breathing steadied a little. The wheeze didn't disappear completely, but it got quieter, less desperate. James pulled out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No." Dorothy grabbed his arm. "Please, no. I can't afford an ambulance. That'll cost thousands of dollars. And if you call, they'll ask questions. They'll want to know why he was in a restaurant cooler. They'll call child services. They'll take him away from me. He needs medical attention." "I know that," Dorothy's voice broke. "You think I don't know that, but I can't afford it. I can't afford any of it. The ambulance, the ER visit, the tests they'll want to run. I'm already behind on his last ER bill from 3 weeks ago. They're threatening to send it to collections." She was crying openly now, still holding Elijah close. "You don't understand. If child services gets involved, they'll say I'm unfit. They'll say I can't take care of him properly, and they'll be right. I can't take care of him. Not really. Not the way he needs. But I'm all he's got." James knelt down so he was eye level with both of them. "Dorothy, I'm not going to call anyone you don't want me to call. But I need you to tell me everything. How did you end up in this situation?" Dorothy looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her he was trustworthy, because she nodded slowly. "His mama, my daughter Sarah, she died 2 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light, killed her instantly." Dorothy's voice was hollow, like she'd told this story so many times it had stopped feeling real. Sarah was a good girl. Single mama working 2 jobs to take care of Elijah, and then she was just gone. "I'm so sorry." "Me too. Every day I'm sorry." Dorothy wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Elijah's daddy never been in the picture. Took off before he was born. So when Sarah died, it was just me. I was 63 already on Social Security, barely making ends meet. But I wasn't going to let my grandson go into the system, so I took him in." "That was brave of you." Dorothy laughed bitterly. "Brave? That's a nice way to put it. Stupid might be more accurate. I didn't know what I was getting into. The costs, the medical bills, the constant worry." She looked down at Elijah, who had curled into her side, still shivering. "He's got severe persistent asthma. That's the worst kind. He needs daily controller medication, rescue inhalers, regular doctor visits. He's allergic to everything: dust, mold, pollen, pet dander. And I live in a basement apartment that's probably full of mold, but it's all I can afford. What about insurance? I got Medicare for myself, but adding Elijah to it was complicated. They wanted all kinds of paperwork about Sarah being dead, about me being his guardian. Took 8 months to get it processed, and even with insurance, the copays and deductibles are killing me. His specialist visits are $50 each. His controller medication is $200 a month. The rescue inhaler is $140. She gestured to the nearly empty inhaler. "That's why I'm rationing this, making it last as long as possible. I know it's dangerous. I know he needs it. But I got rent due next week, and we need groceries, and his school is asking for money for a field trip he probably can't even go on because he'll have an asthma attack on the bus." James felt his throat tighten. "And you're working here to cover all that." "Trying to. I get about $1,200 a month from Social Security. That barely covers rent. Everything else has to come from here." "But you said you're part-time." 25 hours a week. Officially." Dorothy's voice got harder. "They keep me just under 30 hours so they don't have to give me benefits. But I come in early, stay late, work off the clock, hoping they'll see how valuable I am and give me more scheduled hours. Maybe even make me full-time so I can get health insurance through the company." "And do they?" Dorothy's laugh was hollow. "What do you think? I've been doing this for 8 months, working 50, 60 hours a week, getting paid for 25. And nothing's changed, except Trevor keeps finding more things to criticize." "Tell me about Trevor." Dorothy's face hardened. "Trevor's the shift manager, been here 5 years, and he don't like me. Made that clear from the start." "Why not?" "Lots of reasons. I'm old. I'm black. I'm a woman. I'm not fast enough for him, not strong enough, not good enough. Her voice was shaking with suppressed anger now. He calls me grandma in front of customers, not in a nice way. In a way that makes it clear he thinks I'm too old to be working here. James felt his own anger rising. What else does he do? Dorothy hesitated like she was weighing whether to tell him. Then it all came pouring out. Last month, he put me on the schedule for a double shift, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., even though he knows I got arthritis and can barely stand for 8 hours, let alone 12. When I asked if I could split it up, he said, "Maybe you're too old for this job if you can't handle it." She took a shaky breath. 2 weeks ago, I had to leave early because Elijah's school called. He was having an asthma attack. I was only scheduled 4 hours that day, and I'd already worked 3. Trevor docked my pay for the full day and said I was unreliable. Said if it happened again, he'd have to reconsider my employment. That's illegal. I know that. But what am I going to do, Sue? With what money, what lawyer? Dorothy's voice broke. He knows I can't fight back. He knows I need this job too bad to complain. What else? James's voice was quiet but hard. Last week, I asked if I could get paid for some of the extra hours I've been working. I wasn't asking for back pay, just going forward. And you know what he said. Dorothy's eyes filled with fresh tears. He said, "Nobody's forcing you to stay. If you don't like the conditions, there's plenty of people who'd be happy to take your position. Younger people, people who don't complain." She wiped her eyes angrily. He makes comments all the time about my age, about how slow I am, about how I should just retire and make room for someone who can actually keep up. He gives me the worst prep stations, the ones in the back where the lighting's bad and the floor's uneven, so my feet hurt worse. He schedules me for the hardest shifts, the ones where we're understaffed and I have to do twice the work. And tonight, why are you here so late tonight? Trevor called me at 8 p.m., said the closing prep cook called in sick and I needed to come in and cover. I told him I couldn't. I didn't have nobody to watch Elijah. He said if I didn't come in, he'd cut my hours next week. She looked at Elijah with such guilt and pain it was hard to witness. So I brought him. Put him in the cooler because it's the only place Trevor wouldn't look. James felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. How often does this happen? Him calling you in last minute? Once, twice a week. Always with threats about cutting my hours if I don't come, and I can't afford to lose any hours. I'm already barely making it. And you've brought Elijah before? Dorothy nodded miserably. 3 times. 3 times I've had to put my grandson in a refrigerator because I had no other choice. And every time I pray he doesn't get too cold, doesn't have an attack, doesn't hate me for it. She started crying harder. I'm a terrible grandmother. What kind of person does this to a child? You're not terrible, James said firmly. You're desperate. There's a difference. You've been put in an impossible situation, and you're doing the only thing you can to survive. But he's 8 years old. 8. He should be home in bed, not sitting in a cooler at midnight because his grandma's too poor to afford childcare. Elijah stirred, looking up at his grandmother with wide eyes. I don't mind, Grandma. I know you're doing your best. That simple statement, the forgiveness and understanding from an 8-year-old child, broke something in James. This boy, who should have been innocent and carefree, had instead learned to accept neglect as normal, had learned to tell his grandmother it was okay that she couldn't take care of him properly. That wasn't right. That wasn't acceptable. That wasn't the kind of world James wanted to live in. Dorothy, he said carefully, I need to tell you something. She looked up at him, fear flickering back into her eyes. What? My name isn't Mark. It's James Morrison. I own this company. I own all 15 Riverside kitchen locations. Dorothy's face went white. She stood up so fast she nearly fell over. Please, please don't fire me. I know I broke the rules. I know I shouldn't have brought him. But please, I'm begging you, don't take away my job. It's all I got. We'll end up on the street. Please. Stop. James held up his hands. I'm not firing you. I'm fixing this. Fixing what? Everything. Before Dorothy could respond, the back door suddenly burst open with a bang that made all 3 of them jump violently. Trevor walked in, his face set in an expression of annoyance and self-importance. He was in his mid-30s, white, wearing a manager's polo shirt with the Riverside Kitchen logo. His eyes immediately went to Dorothy, then to Elijah, then to James. His expression shifted from annoyance to suspicion to righteous anger in about 2 seconds. What the hell is going on here? His voice was sharp, accusatory. Dorothy, is that a kid? Dorothy instinctively moved in front of Elijah, her body language protective. Trevor, I can explain. Explain what? Why you brought a child into my kitchen? Trevor's voice was rising, getting louder with each word. Do you have any idea how many health code violations that is? How much trouble you just caused me? I'm sorry I didn't have nowhere else. I don't care what you didn't have. Trevor cut her off with a sharp gesture. You're done. Clear out your locker. You're fired. Please. Dorothy's voice cracked. Please, Trevor, I need this job. My grandson needs medicine. We need. Should have thought about that before you broke every rule we have. Trevor was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling corporate. This is way above my pay grade. They're going to want to know how you've been violating health codes right under my nose. It wasn't under your nose, Dorothy said, her voice getting desperate. It was just tonight, just this once, because you called me in last minute, and I didn't have time to find someone to watch him. Oh, so this is my fault now. Trevor's voice dripped with sarcasm. Classic. Take no responsibility for your own actions. This is exactly why I said you were unreliable. I'm not unreliable. I've been here every single day for 3 years. I never miss a shift unless it's a real emergency. I work extra hours you don't even pay me for. Nobody forced you to work extra hours. That's on you. You said if I didn't stay late and come in early, you'd cut my scheduled hours. I said no such thing. Trevor's voice was smooth now, the voice of someone who knew exactly how to cover their tracks. You're making things up, probably because you know you're about to get fired and you're trying to deflect blame. He looked at James for the first time. And who are you, another one of Dorothy's little friends, helping her break rules? James stood up slowly. I'm new here, just learning how things work. Well, let me tell you how things work. Trevor stepped closer, his posture aggressive. We don't bring kids into commercial kitchens. We don't let employees work off the clock. And we don't let little old ladies work here when they're clearly too old and slow to keep up. Dorothy flinched like she'd been slapped. Too old. James repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Yeah, too old. Look at her. She can barely stand up straight. Her hands shake. She's slow. She takes breaks every 5 minutes. Trevor ticked off the complaints on his fingers like he'd been keeping a list. Honestly, I've been trying to get rid of her for months, but HR keeps saying I need concrete grounds for termination. Well, this is pretty damn concrete. He turned back to Dorothy with something like satisfaction in his eyes. You did me a favor tonight, Grandma. Now I can finally get someone competent in here. I'm competent, Dorothy said, her voice small. I do good work. You do mediocre work at best, and you're a liability. Old people like you are always calling in sick, always needing accommodations, always complaining about something. Trevor shook his head. This job is for people who can handle the physical demands, not for people collecting Social Security who should be home knitting or whatever it is old folks do. The casual cruelty in his voice, the dismissive way he spoke about Dorothy like she was garbage to be disposed of, it made James's blood boil. But he kept his expression neutral. He wanted to hear more, wanted to understand exactly what kind of manager Trevor was. She seems like she's been working pretty hard tonight, James said mildly. Kitchen's prepped for tomorrow. Everything looks clean. That's literally the bare minimum of her job. Trevor scoffed. She's supposed to have all this done by 10 p.m. It's almost midnight. That's how slow she is. Maybe she's slow because she's been working since 11 this morning with no break, James suggested. Who told you that? Trevor's eyes narrowed. Dorothy, have you been complaining to the new guy, trying to get him on your side? I didn't complain about nothing, Dorothy said quietly. Right, because you know what happens to people who complain. Trevor's voice had a threatening edge now. They find themselves with fewer and fewer hours until eventually they quit on their own. Is that what you want? Grandma, want me to cut you down to 1 shift a week, 2 hours at a time? You can't do that, Dorothy said, but there was no strength in her voice. That's retaliation. Prove it. Trevor smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Prove that I'm cutting your hours because you complained, and not because business is slow. Prove that I'm not just making normal scheduling decisions. You can't. So maybe you should watch your mouth. He looked at Elijah with distaste. And get that kid out of here before I call the police. This is a place of business, not a daycare. The police. Dorothy's voice went up an octave. Please don't call the police. They'll take him from me. Please. Maybe they should take him from you. Clearly, you can't take care of him if you're bringing him to work in the middle of the night. Trevor was dialing his phone now. I'm calling my district manager. Let him deal with this mess. Put the phone down. James's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a knife. Trevor looked at him annoyed. Look, new guy, I don't know what Dorothy told you, but this doesn't concern you. So why don't you go home and let me handle this? Put the phone down. Something in James's tone made Trevor hesitate. Who do you think you are giving me orders? Someone who's seen enough. James reached up and pulled off the fake beard, then the baseball cap. His face was instantly recognizable to anyone who paid attention to the company, and Trevor clearly did, because his face went from annoyed to confused to absolutely terrified in the space of 3 seconds. Mr. Morrison, his voice came out as a squeak. That's right, and you just showed me exactly what kind of manager you are. Trevor's face went through several colors, red to white to grayish green. Mr. Morrison, I wasn't. This isn't what it looks like. Really, because it looks like you've been systematically harassing and exploiting a 65-year-old employee. It looks like you've been calling her grandma as a slur. It looks like you've been threatening her hours when she can't meet your unreasonable demands. It looks like you've been letting her work off the clock while keeping her part-time so she doesn't get benefits. James stepped closer, and Trevor actually backed up. It looks like you've created such a hostile work environment that she felt she had no choice but to bring her sick grandson to work and hide him in a walk-in cooler. It looks like you've been violating about 50 different labor laws while treating a human being like disposable garbage. I was trying to run an efficient operation. By exploiting desperate people, by age discrimination, by retaliation against employees who dare to ask for fair treatment. James's voice got harder. You're not a manager, Trevor. You're a bully who got a little bit of power and decided to use it to make someone's life hell. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that Dorothy works 60 hours a week but only gets paid for 25? Is it fair that you call her in at the last minute and threaten her job if she can't drop everything? Is it fair that you've been trying to force her out because you think she's too old? Trevor's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. You're done, James said flatly. Clear out your locker. You're fired, effective immediately. You can't fire me. Trevor found his voice along with some misplaced courage. I've been here 5 years. I have seniority. I have rights. I was just doing my job. Your job was to manage people with dignity and respect. Your job was to follow labor laws. Your job was to create a safe, fair work environment. James pointed to the door. You failed at every single one of those things. So yes, I can fire you. And I am. Get out of my restaurant. This is bullshit. Trevor's face was red now, his voice rising. I made this location profitable. I cut costs, improved efficiency. By exploiting workers. That's not improvement, that's just cruelty disguised as management. Fine, fire me. But you're making a mistake. Trevor grabbed his jacket from a hook. This place falls apart without me. Good luck finding someone willing to work as hard as I did for what you pay managers. I'll take my chances. Trevor stormed toward the door, but turned back at the last moment. He looked at Dorothy with pure venom. You did this. You and your sob story. You're going to regret this. The only person who's going to regret anything is you, James said coldly. When you try to explain to your next employer why you were fired for labor law violations and harassment. Now get out before I call the actual police and have you removed for trespassing. Trevor left, slamming the door so hard it shook in its frame. The silence that followed was deafening. Dorothy was staring at James like he'd just performed a miracle. Her arms were wrapped around Elijah, who was watching everything with wide, scared eyes. You fired Trevor, Dorothy said slowly, like she couldn't quite process what had just happened. You fired him. For me. I fired him for being a terrible human being who happened to have a management position. You just helped me see it. But he's been here 5 years. He knows how everything works. What if he's right? What if the restaurant falls apart without him? Then it falls apart. I don't care. I'd rather have a failed restaurant than one that succeeds by crushing people. James looked at her directly. Dorothy, what Trevor did to you was wrong, on every level. And I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry my company let it happen. Dorothy's legs seemed to give out. She sank down onto the metal stool, still holding Elijah. I don't understand. Why? Why are you being so nice to me? People don't just... This doesn't happen. Not to people like me. People like you. James knelt down so he was at eye level with her. Dorothy, you're exactly the kind of person this company should be supporting. You're skilled, dedicated, hardworking. You've been dealt a terrible hand and you're still showing up every day doing your best trying to take care of your grandson. That deserves respect, not exploitation. Tears were streaming down Dorothy's face. I thought, When Trevor found Elijah, I thought it was over. Thought I'd lose my job, lose everything. Thought they'd take him away from me. Nobody's taking him anywhere, and you're not losing your job." James pulled out his phone. "In fact, we're going to fix this whole situation right now." "Fix it? How?" "First, you and Elijah are going to the hospital right now. I'm calling for a car to take you. I can't afford—" "You don't have to afford anything. The company is covering it, all of it." James was already dialing. "We're getting Elijah a full workup with a pediatric pulmonologist. New inhalers, controller medications, nebulizer if he needs one. Everything. And you're getting checked out too. Your arthritis, your blood pressure, whatever else needs attention." Dorothy was shaking her head in disbelief. "That's going to cost thousands of dollars. Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do. Because no 8-year-old should be rationing an asthma inhaler. Because no grandmother should have to choose between medicine and rent." James looked at Elijah. "How are you feeling, buddy?" "Better," Elijah said quietly, "but still cold." James immediately took off his jacket, a nice wool blazer, and wrapped it around the boy. "This should help. You hang on to that." "Thank you," Elijah whispered. James turned back to Dorothy. "Tomorrow, actually today, since it's already morning, you're taking the day off. Full pay. You're going to the doctor, getting Elijah's medication sorted out, and resting. And when you're ready to come back, we're going to have a serious conversation about your position here." Dorothy's face went pale again. "My position?" "Yes, because I'm offering you a full-time position. 40 hours a week, consistent schedule, overtime pay for anything over 40 hours, and full benefits, health insurance, dental vision, benefits that will cover both you and Elijah as your dependent." She just stared at him. "I'm also giving you a significant raise, because from what I've seen, you're one of the hardest workers in this place, and you should be compensated fairly for that." This doesn't make sense." Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. "Why are you doing all this?" James thought about his grandmother, about watching her work herself to death, about the promise he'd made at her funeral. "Because someone should have done this for my grandmother. She raised me after my parents died, worked 3 jobs, died at 62 from a heart attack because she never stopped working long enough to take care of herself." His voice got rough. "I promised myself that if I ever had power, ever had resources, I'd use them to help people like her. People like you." He looked at both Dorothy and Elijah. "This company isn't supposed to work like this. We're supposed to take care of our people. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. I got focused on expansion and profits and forgot about the human beings that make everything possible. But I'm going to fix that, starting right now, starting with you." Dorothy started sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of it. "I don't know what to say. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me. You just have to let me help. Can you do that?" She nodded, unable to speak. A car arrived 20 minutes later, a private medical transport James had arranged. As Dorothy and Elijah headed out, wrapped in warm blankets, the transport team had brought Elijah turned back. "Mr. Morrison," his voice was small but clear, "are you really going to help my grandma?" "Yes," James said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "I'm going to help both of you, I promise." Elijah smiled, a real smile, the first James had seen from him. "Thank you. You're a good person." After they left, James stood alone in the kitchen. He looked around at the prep station where Dorothy had been working, at the neat piles of vegetables she'd chopped, at the small photo of Elijah she'd kept close, at the evidence of hours of hard work that had been taken for granted. He thought about Trevor's face when he'd been talking about Dorothy, the casual cruelty, the dismissiveness, the certainty that he could treat people that way and get away with it. And he thought about how many other Trevors might be out there in his other 14 locations, how many other Dorothys were struggling in silence. James pulled out his phone and started making calls. It was time to change everything. The next morning, James sat in his office at corporate headquarters making calls before most of his staff had arrived. His first call was to Sarah Chen, his HR director. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy. "James, it's 7 in the morning. I know. I need you to drop everything you're doing and conduct a full audit of every single one of our 15 locations. I want to know how many employees are working part-time when they need full-time hours. I want to know who's being scheduled just under the benefits threshold. I want to know about any off-the-clock work. I want to know about any complaints against managers that were dismissed or ignored. I want to know everything." There was a pause as Sarah woke up fully. That's going to take weeks, maybe months. We're talking about interviewing hundreds of employees. I don't care how long it takes. Make it your top priority. Hire temporary staff if you need to. Contract it out to an outside firm if that's faster. But I want a complete, brutally honest picture of how we're treating our employees. Can I ask what prompted this? James thought about Dorothy's face when Trevor had called her grandma with that sneer, about Elijah's blue lips, about the nearly empty inhaler. I found out we've been failing our people, badly, and I'm going to fix it. His next call was to Marcus Rodriguez, his CFO. Marcus answered immediately. He was always an early riser. James, good morning. What can I do for you? I'm implementing a new benefits program, comprehensive health coverage for all employees working more than 20 hours per week, vision, dental, mental health prescription coverage, the full package. 20 hours. That's substantially below the ACA threshold. James, do you know what that's going to cost? I don't care what it costs. Make it happen within 30 days. The board is going to push back on this. Hard. Let them. This is happening. And Marcus, I want the coverage to be good. Not some bare-bones plan with massive deductibles. Real coverage that actually helps people. After Marcus, he called Michael Thompson, his operations director. Mike, I want new policies in place immediately. Mandatory paid breaks every 4 hours. Overtime pay for anything over 40 hours, no exceptions. Strict limits on consecutive hours worked, and a clear reporting system so employees can report violations without fear of retaliation. James, that's a complete overhaul of how we operate. Good. Our current system is broken. We're going to fix it. He called his legal team. I need you to review every manager we have. Look for patterns of complaints, age discrimination, harassment, retaliation, anything that suggests we've got more people like Trevor out there. Call after call, James systematically dismantled the structure that had allowed Dorothy's situation to happen. By the time his executive team started arriving at 9 a.m., he'd already been working for over 2 hours. By 10 a.m., they were all squeezed into his office. Sarah, Marcus, Michael, and Lisa Park from marketing. They all looked concerned. James Marcus started carefully. These changes you're proposing, they're going to significantly increase our labor costs. We're talking millions of dollars annually. I'm aware. The shareholders aren't going to like this. I don't care what they like. Sarah leaned forward. James, I support what you're trying to do. But we need to be strategic about this. We can't just blow up our entire labor model overnight. Why not? Because change takes time. Because we need to train managers on new policies. Because we need to budget for increased costs. Because we've been exploiting people and we're scared to stop. James's voice was sharp. Is that what you're saying, Sarah? That's not fair. You want to know what's not fair? Last night, I found one of our employees, a 65-year-old grandmother with severe arthritis, working a 12-hour shift with no overtime pay. She's officially part-time, so we don't have to give her benefits, but she works 50-plus hours a week, hoping we'll eventually make her full-time. James looked around the room. And you know where her 8-year-old grandson with severe asthma was while she worked, sitting in a walk-in cooler because she couldn't afford childcare. And our shift manager called her in at the last minute with threats about cutting her hours if she didn't come. The room went silent. A walk-in cooler at midnight, a child with asthma, because we don't pay enough for her to afford basic necessities, because we don't provide insurance so she can't afford his medications, because our manager was such a bully that she was terrified to say no. James stood up. That's happening in our restaurants, on our watch, while we sit here talking about budget concerns and shareholder value. So, no, I don't care about doing this strategically. I don't care about taking our time. People are suffering right now today, and we're going to fix it right now today. Lisa spoke up. What about the PR angle we could— No, James cut her off. We're not using this for marketing. We're not going to pat ourselves on the back for doing basic human decency. We're just going to do it because it's right. What happened to Dorothy? Michael asked quietly. And Trevor? Trevor's fired. Dorothy's now a full-time employee with full benefits. I've also arranged for immediate medical care for her grandson and childcare support. James sat back down. And I want to make something very clear to all of you. What happened with Trevor, the harassment, the exploitation, the retaliation that cannot happen again. If we find other managers doing similar things, they're gone. I don't care about their tenure or their performance metrics. Gone. Over the next few weeks, the changes rippled through the company like an earthquake. The HR audit Sarah conducted uncovered uncomfortable truths. 7 other employees were working significant off-the-clock hours. 12 were part-time but consistently scheduled just under 30 hours. 4 had filed complaints about their managers that had been dismissed or ignored. 3 more managers were fired. 2 resigned rather than comply with the new policies. James let them all go without regret, but he also found other things. A single father who'd been quietly struggling to balance work and childcare. A college student who'd been working split shifts around her class schedule and slowly burning out. An immigrant worker who'd been afraid to ask for fair treatment because of his visa status. One by one, James met with them, fixed their situations, made things right, and slowly something remarkable happened. Employee morale improved dramatically. People started smiling at work, actually smiling. Staff started staying longer than a few months. Word spread about the changes and job applications flooded in. Turns out people wanted to work for a company that treated them well. Customer satisfaction scores went up. The food got better when people aren't exhausted and stressed. They cook better. Service improved. Happy employees are better at their jobs. Even sales increased. Customers could tell the difference. They could feel that something had changed, that the people serving them were actually happy to be there. 3 months after that night in the kitchen, James visited Riverside Kitchen, Atlanta again. This time he walked in through the front door during the busy lunch rush. Dorothy was there working the prep station during her scheduled morning shift, but she looked different, healthier. Her face had color. Her movements were smoother, less pained. When she saw James, her whole face lit up. "Mr. Morrison!" She actually hurried over something she couldn't have done 3 months ago. "What brings you by?" "Just wanted to check on things. How are you, Dorothy?" "I'm good, real good, better than I've been in years." She held up her hands. "See, the new arthritis medication is working. I can actually move my fingers without pain now, and I can stand for a whole shift without feeling like I'm dying." "That's wonderful. And Elijah?" Dorothy's smile got even bigger. "Oh, Mr. Morrison, he's doing amazing. That specialist you sent us to Dr. Patel, she's been a miracle. Got Elijah on a whole new treatment plan. He hasn't had a single bad asthma attack in 8 weeks. 8 weeks. She says if he stays stable, he might even be able to play sports next year." "I'm so glad. And school is going so much better now that I can get him there on time every morning. His teacher says he's one of the smartest kids in class. He's catching up on everything he missed, and she thinks he might even skip ahead a grade." James felt warmth spread through his chest. "That's incredible news. And the child care assistants, that program you set up, it's changed everything. I can actually work my shift and know Elijah's safe and happy with Miss Jennifer. She picks him up from school, gives him a snack, helps with homework, makes sure he takes his medication. And she knows how to handle his asthma if something happens." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "For the first time in 2 years, I'm not scared all the time. I'm not constantly waiting for the next crisis. I can breathe. We can both breathe. You deserve it, Dorothy, all of it. You saved us, Mr. Morrison. You saved our lives." She grabbed his hand. "I don't know how to ever thank you enough. You're thanking me by being here, by taking care of yourself and Elijah, by being part of this team." James looked around the kitchen. "Speaking of which, how's the new manager working out?" "Keisha, she's wonderful, actually listens to us, treats us like human beings, makes reasonable schedules, doesn't threaten or bully anyone." Dorothy's voice got thick. "It's like working at a different restaurant. People are actually happy here now." James talked to other staff members. They echoed Dorothy's sentiments. The atmosphere had completely changed. People were working together instead of in fear. They were helping each other, supporting each other. This was what he'd wanted to build. This was what Riverside Kitchen was supposed to be. 6 months after that night, James stood in front of his board of directors for the quarterly meeting. He knew what was coming. The board chair, Richard Blackwell, had been increasingly vocal about concerns regarding the new labor policies. "James," Richard said formally, "I'd like to discuss the financial impact of your recent initiatives." "Of course." "Our labor costs have increased by 22% across all locations. Our profit margins are down 18%. Several major shareholders have expressed concerns." "I'm aware of the numbers. Are you concerned?" "No." Richard's eyebrows rose. "You're not concerned that we're making significantly less profit. We're not making less profit. We're making less excessive profit. There's a difference. We're still profitable, still growing, just not at the expense of human dignity." James, I understand you had an emotional experience. It wasn't emotional. It was educational. James stood up. Can I tell you all a story? The board members shifted uncomfortably but didn't object. James told them everything. About Dorothy working 12-hour shifts for part-time wages, about Elijah in the walk-in cooler, about Trevor's harassment and exploitation, about the fear in an old woman's eyes when she thought she'd lose everything. That was happening in our restaurant, James said. That was the result of our policies or lack of policies. We created a system that allowed bullies like Trevor to exploit vulnerable people. We incentivized managers to keep people part-time to save money on benefits. We looked the other way when people worked off the clock. We prioritized profit over people. He looked around the table, and I didn't know. I was so focused on expansion and market share and quarterly earnings that I lost sight of the human cost. But I know now. And I'm not going back. Richard was quiet for a long moment. The shareholders expect returns, and they're getting them. Just slightly smaller returns. They'll survive. But you know what wouldn't survive my conscience if I kept running a company that treated people like Dorothy the way we did. James sat down. So yes, our costs are up. But you know what else is up? Employee retention, customer satisfaction, brand reputation, applications from quality candidates who want to work for a company with values. Sales are actually increasing because people want to support ethical businesses. He pulled up a slide showing long-term projections. In the short term, yes, we're less profitable. But in the long term, this is more sustainable. Lower turnover means lower training costs. Higher satisfaction means better food and service. Better reputation means more customers. This isn't just the right thing to do morally. It's good business. Richard studied the numbers. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. You know what, James? You're right. James blinked. I am. Yes. My father worked in restaurants his whole life. Never got benefits. Never got respect. Died too young because he couldn't afford health care. Richard's voice got rough. I've spent my career chasing profit margins. But hearing about Dorothy and her grandson, it reminds me why I got into business in the first place. To build something meaningful, not just something profitable. He looked at the other board members. I move that we not only support James's initiatives, but expand them. Let's make Riverside Kitchen the gold standard for employee treatment in this industry. Several other board members nodded. One spoke up. My daughter works in food service. The stories she tells me about how she's treated, I don't want Riverside Kitchen to be one of those stories. I support this. All in favor, Richard called. 8 hands went up. Only 1 stayed down. Motion carries. Richard smiled at James. Go change the industry. We're behind you. Over the next year, Riverside Kitchen became a case study in business schools. Articles appeared in major publications. Other restaurant chains started copying the policies. The industry began to shift, but James didn't care about the recognition. He cared about the Dorothy Williamses of the world. He cared about making sure no grandmother had to hide her grandson in a cooler. He cared about building something his own grandmother would have been proud of. 2 years after that night in the kitchen, James received an invitation to Dorothy's retirement party. She was finally retiring for real this time at 67 with a full pension and health coverage that would continue. The Riverside Kitchen Atlanta dining room was packed with current and former employees. Dorothy sat at the head table, Elijah beside her. The boy had grown tall, healthy, vibrant. He was laughing at something one of the servers was saying. When Dorothy saw James, she stood up and walked over. She moved easily now without pain, without the exhaustion that had defined her for so long. She hugged him tight. Thank you for everything, for seeing me, for caring, for changing everything. You changed things, Dorothy. You and Elijah. Your courage to keep going, to keep fighting, that's what made the difference. Maybe. But you're the one who stopped, who asked questions, who gave a damn. Dorothy pulled back, looking him in the eye. Do you know how many people walked through that kitchen over the years and never saw me, really saw me, hundreds, but you saw me, and that changed my life. Later that evening, after most guests had left, James sat with Dorothy and a few longtime employees sharing stories. You know what the best part is? Dorothy said. It's not just that you helped me, it's that you changed things for everyone. All these new policies, the support systems, you've changed hundreds of lives. I got letters, James said, emails, people telling me their stories. It's humbling. Good. Stay humble. Dorothy smiled. But also stay fierce. Because there are still Trevors out there, still companies that treat people like garbage, still grandmas hiding their grandkids in coolers because they got no other choice. You started something, Mr. Morrison. Don't let it stop. I won't. I promise. 3 years after that night, James was invited to speak at the National Restaurant Association conference. He stood at the podium looking at hundreds of industry leaders. 3 years ago, he began, I found an elderly grandmother working in my kitchen at midnight. She'd been on her feet for 12 hours. Her grandson was hiding in a walk-in cooler, and I realized I'd built a system that forced people to make impossible choices. He told the whole story, held nothing back. The exploitation, the harassment, the human cost of profit maximization. I'm not here to tell you I'm special, James said. I'm here to tell you I was failing. We're all failing. This industry has normalized exploitation. We've accepted that high turnover and low wages and lack of benefits are just how things work, but they don't have to be. He showed the financial data, the improvements in retention satisfaction sales. You can be profitable and ethical. You can treat people well and still succeed. It's not a trade-off. It's an investment. After the speech, restaurant owners lined up to talk to him. Some were skeptical. Some were defensive, but many were genuinely interested. One woman in her 50s approached with tears in her eyes. I own a small diner. I've been struggling with the same questions. How do I pay fairly when margins are thin? Your story gave me hope. It's possible, James assured her. It takes work. It takes commitment. But it's possible. And it's worth it. 5 years after that night, James read about a new federal bill, the Fair Restaurant Labor Act. The article mentioned that the bill was inspired by stories of exploitation in the industry, including the widely publicized case of Dorothy Williams and Riverside Kitchen. His phone rang. Dorothy, did you see we helped change the law? You helped change the law, James corrected. Your story. Your courage. Our story, Dorothy insisted. Yours and mine and Elijah's. Together. After they hung up, James sat in his office thinking about the journey. From that one night, that one moment of choosing to investigate instead of ignore, everything had changed. Not just for Dorothy and Elijah, for thousands of workers, for an entire industry slowly waking up to the idea that people mattered more than profit margins. His assistant buzzed. James, there's a woman here named Maria Garcia. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Something about working conditions at a competitor. James smiled. Send her in. Because this was how change happened. One conversation at a time, one person at a time, one company at a time. It started with one grandmother and one boy and one man who chose to stop and see them, really see them. And from that moment of seeing everything changed, James stood to greet Maria, ready to hear her story, ready to help if he could, ready to keep fighting for a world where people like Dorothy never had to choose between their job and their grandchild's safety, because that's what real success looked like. Not a bank balance, not a stock price, not an empire. Success was measured in lives changed, in children who could breathe easy, in grandmothers who could retire with dignity, in workers treated like human beings. That was the legacy James was building. Every conversation, every policy change, every person helped. One kitchen at a time, one employee at a time, one life at a time. And it all started because he saw a light burning and decided to investigate. Because he heard a knife tapping and decided to listen. Because he saw an old woman working herself to death and decided to care. Sometimes the most important decisions we make are the simple ones. To stop, to pay attention, to see the people right in front of us. James had stopped, and in stopping, he'd started a revolution. A revolution in how we treat each other, in how we value human dignity, in how we define success. It began with Dorothy and Elijah. With Trevor's cruelty and the system that enabled it, with one man choosing to tear down that system and build something better. And it would continue, in every restaurant that chose to follow his example, in every worker who demanded better treatment, in every customer who supported ethical businesses. The revolution would continue because people had seen what was possible. They'd seen that things could be different, that profit and ethics weren't enemies, that treating people well wasn't just moral, it was smart. James looked out his window at the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere out there were more Dorothys, more Elijahs, more people struggling in silence, hoping So Mione would see them. He couldn't save them all, but he could keep trying, keep fighting, keep building a company and inspiring an industry that valued people over profit. That was enough. That was everything.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.